James Baker's one of the most significant Secretaries of State in American history.
He is the epitome of what makes a great public servant. Selflessness, enough toughness to get the job done, but an understanding of where the other guy is coming from.
He's answered the call in so many ways, at so many times when his country needed him.
When James Baker III was born in 1930, expectations were already high. He was the grandson of an original partner of Baker Bott's law firm and first chairman of the board at Rice University. Jim earned his bachelor's degree from Princeton. He was a captain in the Marine Corps before earning his law degree from the University of Texas and practicing law in Houston for the next 12 years.
He became great tennis partners with George Herbert Walker Bush, and so that friendship came there, Bush being a Republican, and Baker at that point was a Democrat, but eventually he became what's called a moderate Republican from Texas.
The tragic death in 1970 of his wife Mary left Jim at a crossroads. To help cope with the grief, George Bush encouraged Jim's involvement in politics and asked him to join his U.S. Senate campaign. Bush lost the race, but Jim's career was on a new path. First, he was finance chairman for the Republican Party, then regional chairman for the Nixon presidential campaign. Finally, he arrived in Washington as Undersecretary of Commerce for President Ford in 1975.
James Baker in 1976 ran Gerald Ford's campaign against Ronald Reagan. And in 1980, James Baker ran George Herbert Walker Bush's campaign against Ronald Reagan. And yet Reagan, when he got elected president, said, I want Baker to be my chief of staff. I want Baker to run my White House.
He'd run my presidential campaign as well as President Ford's campaign, and he'd proved himself. As chief of staff to President Reagan, he had the president's ear and a great deal of influence.
There's something very engaging and warm about James Baker, but boy, you get into a business deal with him or you double cross him, this is what you need in a White House chief of staff.
Jim managed Reagan's landslide re-election over Walter Mondale in 1984. He served 3 years of Reagan's second term as Treasury Secretary before directing George Bush's successful campaign for president in 1988. Once in office, Bush called on his friend from Texas to become the 61st Secretary of State.
They have such trust with each other, they had developed a body language, almost a head nod or a little smile, and they knew exactly what each other were thinking.
When I was at the White House and he was Secretary of State, we were in remarkable times because Eastern Europe was being liberated from communism, the Soviet Union was in imminent collapse. It was a time of the first Gulf War. Jim Baker was always someone who was able to stop, step back and say, now what are we going to try to achieve and then get it done.
Perhaps no achievement was bigger than helping Bush bring a peaceful end to the Cold War. Jim's unprecedented invitation to bring his Soviet counterpart to the Baker home in Wyoming played a vital role.
Shevardnadze, who must have felt like his world was crashing down around him, didn't need to be pushed into a corner. He needed to be led to a good outcome, and I think Jim Baker was very capable at doing that.
His skills as a mediator were evident in a moment at the 1990 conference in Ottawa, when the effort to unify Germany nearly collapsed.
Everybody thought the deal was done. And somehow the Germans and the Russians fell into disagreement, and Jim had already gone to bed. Here comes Hans Dietrich Genscher down the hall of Jim Baker's hotel saying, where is he? I have to talk to him. I have to talk to him. And so Jim dutifully got up, came to a solution that would allow Genscher to sign the deal, sold it to Shevardnadze, and everything went off the next morning as planned.
Less than a year later, Jim helped construct the 34-nation alliance that responded to Iraq's invasion of Kuwait.
Our aim today must be to convince Saddam Hussein that the just and humane demands of this council and of the international community cannot be ignored.
And in the fall of 1991, Jim helped conceive the groundbreaking Madrid Peace Conference, leading to closer cooperation between the countries of the Middle East. Nearly a decade after leaving his post at the State Department, Jim was in the spotlight again as chief legal advisor for George W. Bush during the recount in Florida.
This is an extraordinary procedure, and we are entering new, uncertain, and controversial territory.
Since 1993, Jim has served as the honorary chair of the James Baker Institute at Rice University. He and Susan, his wife and partner since 1973, live in Houston. Jim remains committed to finding solutions to some of the biggest issues of our time.
We don't have the economic power today to go running all around the world protecting every time we divine a need to protect people, to go using our military to protect them. We can't do it. We can't do it economically.
He's someone who I have complete confidence in, and the American people have counted on for his consistent, fair leadership over several decades.
Baker is on the top 4 or 5 modern statespersons. That skills as a lawyer and a deal maker, when to play it soft and when to play it hard. He's truly one of our outstanding American figures.
Tonight, we honor James A. Baker with the History-Making Texan Award for the steady leadership he provided through some of the most challenging times this country has seen.